Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us at H3 TV, where we interview a different guest every Wednesday to talk about hope, health, and happiness. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Laura Stack. We know how important it is to pour hope, health, and happiness into people's lives, and so we have Laura joining us to share about her perspective on health. Hey, Laura, thanks for being with us.
Hi, Annie. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about who are you, Laura? What do you do?
Well, I am a mother of three. My oldest is 26, my youngest is 20, and my middle son would have been 21 years old. Sadly, he died by suicide on November 20th of 2019. He was dabbing high concentrate marijuana, very potent products here in Colorado where we live. So now, after 30 years of being a professional speaker, I have turned my platform to youth marijuana prevention. And I am the founder and CEO of a nonprofit called Jonny's Ambassadors. We are working really hard to educate people on the dangers of today's marijuana on youth.
Thank you so much. I love when we can take our pain and turn it into our passion and our purpose to serve others so they don't have to suffer like we have.
Hopefully that's what we're doing, and, keeping people from following Jonny's path as much as possible.
Thank you for that, Laura. Laura, when we think about health, we know that health is a lot of things, right? I always think there's 7 areas. There's physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, financial, relational, and career health. So when you think about health, what's the most important area of health that you're really passionate about and teaching other people about?
Gosh, I would have to say from the experience of the 5 years that Jonny was addicted to marijuana, from the time that he started using until the time of his death, and then certainly the last couple of years, I would say mental health is probably the biggest area of focus. One of the things that people don't really understand about marijuana in children, we don't work with adult marijuana use. Not that there is a scenario that marijuana would be harmless for anybody, but our specific focus is on youth because their brains are still forming and it's particularly harmful. But one of the things people don't understand about mental health and marijuana is that marijuana can actually cause mental health problems in youth. Many people think, oh, they're depressed, or, oh, they're stressed. And that's why they're using marijuana. So it's kind of this chicken egg thing, where the reality is, in many states, sadly, where marijuana is legal, it's very accessible to our youth, and they can get it at the age of 18. There's a lot of loopholes in the medical marijuana program. It's hard to get alcohol, very hard. You have to be 21, and they crack down here in Colorado. It's very hard to get cigarettes now at 21. But when you're 18 and you turn 18 as a senior in high school, you can go to our pot shop docs, as we call them. You pay a few $100s. You make up some reason that you need marijuana. You have a migraine. You have a backache. You can use any excuse you want, and you will be given your medical marijuana card. Now you can legally go to these dispensaries, buy whatever you want to. And so they're not buying it because they're ill mentally. They're buying it because they want to get high. Fortunately, the use of marijuana in young people can cause mental illness. It causes depression. It makes people anxious. It's actually counterindicated for psychiatric conditions. So that's really one of the big messages that we want to get out to people, is that marijuana causes mental illness, not the other way around.
I love that, Laura. I think it's really important. I've met a lot of people that smoke weed a lot or use it in all different ways, and they say, I have anxiety. And I'm like, do you understand that it is making you more paranoid?
Yeah, maybe cut back on weed. That might be a little more productive. Yes, it can make people paranoid, causes bipolar, can cause severe delusional thinking about persecution, or that people are watching me. Jonny used to think the mob was after him. He had a little piece of tape over his phone because he thought the phone was watching him, that people were spying on him through his phone. I mean, just very paranoid thinking that can result.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me how many side effects and how we don't talk about it. So I love that you're here with me because you do talk about it. And I think it
Yes.
makes some people uncomfortable, but we have to talk about whatever it is that there's shame around or silence around or justification around so we don't have to lose so many more lives. Let's keep people
Yes.
alive. Let's talk about it. Let's understand it. What about for you? I always think when we are teaching this stuff, it's so important we take care of our own health. Do you specifically have an area of health for yourself personally that you like to work on or think about? So you can keep doing the good work.
Yeah. I would say out of all of yours, it would be probably emotional, just because it's really been hell. Not just the 5 years that he was using and going through all that, because I just didn't understand. I just didn't know. I didn't know marijuana was any different from when I was a kid, right? It was the old mindset of it's just weed, right? It's just pot. I used it. I'm fine. Didn't hurt me, right? And I was so wrong because I didn't know anything about the designer marijuana, the products that are being used today, the shatters, the wax, the dabs. I didn't know any of that. And I didn't know, when I was a kid, it was like 2%, 5% potency. And now it can be 80, 90, 100% pure THC. It's not laced. It's not spiked. It doesn't have fentanyl. They just take the THC out of the plant and now it's a chemical. I didn't know that. These products didn't even come on the market in Colorado until 2015 was the first year they were tracked by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So for me, it's a grief process because, you just feel like, I just wish I would have known, there's a lot of should have, would have, could have, when you lose a child. And then, he died almost exactly 2 years ago now. And so it's really been a grief journey, an emotional health for me. And I have to admit, starting the nonprofit has been very healing, being willing to speak up. There's a lot of, I would say, shaming that goes on where people want, and especially the pro marijuana people, they don't want me talking about my son becoming psychotic. They don't want people to know. They want them to think it's like safe and natural and benign and you should be using it to make yourself feel better. And it's just a sham. And so I think emotionally there's anger, a lot of just frustration for just the lack of control I feel like I had over the whole situation. It was like a runaway train that there was nowhere to go and no one to talk to and no one understood cannabis-induced psychosis. I'd never even heard of that. And now we have 5,000 ambassadors and 27 people teaching our youth curriculum and 41 people teaching our adult curriculum around the US. And I feel like we're just getting started. And that's really healing, so I continue to work on my emotional health around that.
I love that. I'm so sorry for your loss of Jonny. I've said it before, but I want to say it publicly. I'm so sorry. We never want to have such a horrific tragedy to give us more knowledge. But I also love, Laura, that you and your husband have taken time to understand this, to research it, to learn about it, so you can educate people because we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And if you grew up in the 60s and you're like, oh, smoking weed, it's no big deal. It's just relaxing and people do it occasionally.
Right. Love and peace. Yeah.
Yeah. You're saying there's a whole new world out there. There's a whole new product. So I just appreciate.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's like apples and oranges. I mean, it's totally different. I mean, I used to smoke weed. I'm not a prude. I mean, we had, I was kind of more ditch weed, but it had a lot of seeds and leaves in it. But, we would roll it up in a paper and smoke it and pass it around, as a joint. And it was little more than Easter grass. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that the tetrahydrocannabinol THC was very low, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s into the mid 2000s. And then the chemists started to get involved. And no one was paying attention. There was no regulation. There are no caps on potency. And they figured out, some clever person, that you could take weed, the plant, and you can run a solvent through it, like butane or propane, and it breaks off the little trichomes on the bud that holds the THC. and it breaks them off. And the solvent and the THC kind of go into this tray and they throw the plant away. So what we're talking about today does not grow out of the ground naturally. There's no plant involved. It's just chemicals. And then they process them and filter this, try to get most of the solvent out. Can't get it all out. And they make them into shatters, wax, crumble, rosin, live sugar. I mean, just the craziest. If you've not been in a dispensary in the past 2 years, go in, because they keep the flower in the back. Like, they want people to buy these really potent, really strong, the vapes. They distill it just like they distill vodka. They can take like a 60% wax and turn it into a 90% distillate oil that the kids are vaping, right? And they're telling their parents they're vaping. Mm-hmm. And the parents think they're talking about nicotine. Mm-hmm. And they're using an incredibly potent drug. It's very similar to cocaine to crack. Like, that's a good analogy of what the kids are using. And it's in the dispensary and they only have to be 18. There's 4,000 18-year-olds in Colorado right now with medical marijuana cards that go buy this stuff legally for making up some cockamamie thing. They're not sick. They don't need, they just want to get high. It's like the biggest party drug. You can get marijuana here in 5 minutes. Sorry, I get started and get passionate.
No, it's okay. It's okay. You're educating me. I've never been in the distillery. I don't know this stuff.
The dispensaries are, it's shocking. It's in everything. It's drops, it's inhalers. You can have eye drops. They have tampons, suppositories. They have THC in everything that you can use to get high. And all these fancy products, the candies, the edibles, the popcorn, the soda, these are very attractive to kids. And then they go back to the high school and the middle school. Sadly, 1 in 10 of our middle schoolers here in Colorado, we're talking 12 years old, okay, is addicted to marijuana. And it is so normalized because of all this commercialization and so potent. Like one dab, that's why they call them dabs. You just need like a pinhead is the equivalent of like 4 or 5 bowls of marijuana at one time.
I wanted you to talk about something, Laura. You just said a lot of people will say when it comes to marijuana, you know what, Laura, it's not addictive. It's not that. It's just for fun. You can't be addicted to us. Tell us about that, because I think that is
by definition, it's actually defined as addictive medically because it's in the DSM-5, which is the Bible for psychological and psychiatric practice. It is one of 12 addictive substances that's listed, and it has been for many, many years since the new edition came out. There are symptoms that they define for doctors: CWS, cannabis withdrawal syndrome. You cannot have withdrawals from something that you're not addicted to. Medically, it's defined as addictive.
Yeah. Why does it get that myth? Because I think people, so often friends, family, acquaintances will say, the nice thing about weed is, marijuana is not addictive. Other drugs are addictive, but marijuana is no big deal. It's natural. Why?
Maybe they're thinking of the old days. In the old Woodstock days, you could easily pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. No big deal. But what happens with this highly potent stuff in kids' brains that's still forming? We have a natural chemical in our bodies that many people don't know about called Anandamide. It's Sanskrit for pure bliss, and it's the feel-good chemical. Molecularly, the bottom of the THC molecule and the anandamide molecule are the same. It's not a complete bind because it's different on top, but the THC molecule is similar enough that it can trick the brain, and it binds with what's called the cannabinoid 1 receptor, which is all throughout our brains, and it blocks our natural chemical from being able to get into the receptor and be used correctly. So our natural chemical stops being made. So the brain goes, whoa, wait, we need more. So they have to put more THC in there. And then all of a sudden you need THC just to feel normal because your body is no longer producing anandamide and 2-AG, and we won't get into like the neuroscience of it.
Yeah.
But in youth, for example, we know that because THC blocks and binds to this receptor, that from youth from the ages 14 to 19 have thinning. They've actually proven in MRIs that their prefrontal cortex is thinner when they use marijuana. So it may be true that marijuana of bygone days is not addictive. This stuff is so potent, gets you so high, so fast, and it sticks in those receptors for a very long time. And THC doesn't exit your body for 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. So for people to say, oh, I only use it on the weekend. Well, then that means it's never left your body. So why don't we go off of it for a month? And in fact, that is the protocol for young people who are addicted to marijuana. 1 in 3 youth who use marijuana develop a cannabis use disorder, CUD, and it takes 30 days of inpatient rehabilitation, residential, to detox and get them through the withdrawal. It's quite uncomfortable, quite painful, actually, to withdraw from marijuana. So they're simply uneducated to say that it isn't addictive.
Well, this is super insightful and heartbreaking all at the same time. But I know that over the last 2 years, you have to have had some wins. So I want to know about, who are you getting through to? What are some success stories? What are some hope stories? Give me one of those. What can you tell us about that? This is hard and heavy, but
so many. Okay. So many. I mean, I get hate mail every day. People telling me I was a terrible parent. I have blood on my hands. My child's in hell. I mean, just hate mail every day. But I also get love messages every day from people saying, you saved my child. People calling me who are desperate, help. My child is in the emergency room. He's having a complete psychotic episode. We're able to say, it's cannabis involved. Yes, which is why they're calling me, right? That they're clearly in cannabis-induced psychosis, getting them resources, helping them with an intervention, figuring out where they can go, getting their child help. And then a month later, sometimes up to 4 months later, it takes the brain a while to recover sometimes, and keeping them sober. The psychosis is gone. They recovered. Oh, they're not really bipolar. Oh, they're not really schizophrenic. Wow. It was a cannabis-induced psychosis. And the children who go through that and then go, whoa, okay, that was really scary. And I am never going to do that again. And we have a lot of success stories and sober teens. We know that there's a 5-fold increase in psychosis in those who use, and a 7-fold increase, sadly, in suicide in children who use. That's scientific. It's been proven. So we know we're saving lives. Know we're saving lives. And
I lost my brother, and he was definitely smoking weed at the time he took his life. So when you started this work, and it wasn't as strong, but it definitely affected his brain and how
it does. Yes.
Process and think. And he was young and he wasn't fully developed. And so I love the work you're doing. And I'm sorry for the suicide, but I love the good that can come out of the broken. So I want to know, Laura, right now, we know we have listeners that are moms and dads, and their kids are saying, first of all, you're overreacting. Second of all, I'm not using, I don't have a problem. They're lying about it. What would you tell them? What can you tell those parents out there that are like, Laura, I got to help my kid, but they're not even acknowledging they're using, or they're saying it's no big deal, or I'm being irrational. What would you tell those parents?
Well, of course they're going to tell you that. And it's tricky because teens are irritable anyway, grumpy anyway, hormonal anyway, so you do have to separate, what's kind of normal teenage behavior. But, if you see your child start to withdraw from things that they love to do, isolate themselves more, become more secretive, if you've kind of slacked off and backed down as a parent because you're tired, right? In terms of who they're with, where they're going, do their parents use marijuana in the house? Do you have very clear, strict, no use rules around that? Backpack searches, car searches, room searches, all of these things are very appropriate. Kids are very good at hiding things. If you suspect it, drug testing is appropriate. Say, yes, I trust you, and we're going to be able to continue to trust you. So we're going to do whatever you think weekly, Many parents I know do a weekly drug test to make sure. And, there are commensurate rewards and consequences with the result. And so really before a child is 18, because once they turn 18, you lose control. Jonny withdrew all his consents at school. We couldn't even look at his grades in the parent portal at the end of his senior year because he turned 18. He stopped going to school. He told his doctor that we couldn't have any information when he was at the university. He had a full ride scholarship because he had straight A's, that he had changed dorm rooms and they didn't even let us know. He told them that his dorm room was bugged because he was so paranoid from using marijuana. And they moved his dorm room and we didn't even know where he was. We couldn't even find him when we went to school. So do everything you can before they're 17 to intervene, because you lose a lot of power once they're over that.
Yeah, I love that. Very important. Colleges is a whole nother ball of wax that I wish we could be involved in, because I had a son that they hid things and they kept taking mine. And I was like, okay, he's not even going to school. How do I not know this? But anyway, another day.
And college is hard because, their brains keep forming. Women until they're 25, young men 28 to 30, and big, deleterious consequences, negative impacts in the brain. The brain is plastic, but there's a point that it doesn't heal. We see declines in IQ, loss of focus, memory. It's very hard to be a student. Our youngest is at Colorado State University, and he's on our board of directors. Obviously, he's very anti-marijuana because of his brother, but he works very quietly under the radar. He's in a fraternity, but he'll have people come to him and say, dude, I'm sweating, I'm throwing up, just all this stuff. And James is like, stop using the weed. They're like, that's not what it is. He said, if you don't use weed for a month, then you can come and tell me for sure that it's not weed. And they'll do it. And they'll be like, you were right. I feel so much better. It's like, duh. So yeah, we've got to educate, as young as 10, because they start using at 12 years old. It's so accessible. It's available through high school because of the big times of brain formation. And then even into college, because, 25, really weed shouldn't be legal until you're 25, not 21, but the horse is kind of out of the barn. So we need to teach them about their brains. They only get one, and they got to treat it like their BFF. It's so critical for their mental health.
I love that you are empowering parents there. I think that's really important. I've raised 3 young adult children. They are now 23 to 33. And, I always went through their room. I was always going through whatever. And if they ever said to me, don't you trust me? I'd say, sure. But if there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to worry about. I'm going to come that you live in our home. I care about you. I love you. And if you save one life and you piss off a whole bunch of teenagers, it's worth it. Piss them off. You're the parent.
You're not their friend, right? You're the parent. That is your job.
For reminding parents, because no kid's going to say, come on in, look through my stuff. They're always going to be offended, but it's okay. It's better to offend than bury, right? Like, honestly, let's look, let's be involved in their lives. Let's ask them questions.
We tracked his car, we tracked his phone. It's so addictive. He had 3 mental hospital stays, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, as the years went by and it was impacting him more, and he became anxious and became paranoid and all of those things. That's not the point you want to be at, right? You want to get it before it gets to this point. And today it's so easy to hide. It doesn't smell. It's not like, the skunky, like, ooh, I smell pot, right? You're not going to smell anything. You don't know. They just, put it back in their pocket,
Yeah.
Got to stay on top of it.
What can people do if they want to be a voice for this movement? What can they do?
Oh gosh, we are inviting anyone who is concerned about youth marijuana use to please join us. We have a lot of different ways to get involved. johnnysambassadors.org. And they just go to the join menu. We do things as simple as share our graphics on your Facebook, right? Okay. Real easy to do. We have webinars, 75 hours of doctors giving presentations on the harms of youth marijuana use. We have toolkits, we have videos, all the way up to becoming a certified Jonny's Ambassadors trainer. We have a small army of people out there that we give them PowerPoint and curriculum and say, here, please go teach this. in your
Where are
community.
they teaching, Laura? Where would somebody invite a teacher in? A youth
Anywhere
group,
they can
church,
get a
school?
space, churches, libraries, community centers. A lot of them do them at schools, at PTO, for youth groups, for teens, anywhere you have, coalitions. So it's really just being used all over the place.
Okay.
For different drug prevention conferences. It really depends on what the person's role is. Sometimes they're psychiatrists and they want to add it to their practice to have a seminar for the parents of their teens. So we're getting the whole gamut of people who are involved in different religious groups who want to bring it to their communities. So anyone concerned with youth marijuana use can be an ambassador and use our training.
I love that. So Laura, when you or one of your ambassadors is out there speaking and teaching, how are the kids responding? How are the young people? Are they curious? Are they interested? Are they offended? Are they open? How do you what's the feedback?
They're really curious. We have two different classes. There's an adult class, like how to parent, to make sure your kid isn't using kind of thing. But then there's also a teen class. They don't respond well to the, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. Here's your brain on drugs because I said so, that kind of thing. But what they really like is the neurology. They think it's fascinating how emotion and like, how is the runner's high created? Where does that come from? How THC mimics our own endocannabinoids. What happens when THC locks in different parts of the brain? What are the effects that we can see through science, through MRI imaging, through blood flow, through lack of activity in the brain? They think that's fascinating. They also really resonate with just understanding how big tobacco marketed to them to take advantage of them and to lie and say, oh, it's not addictive and all this stuff. And how similarly, big marijuana is doing exactly the same thing because they need our kids to be addicted. To be profitable. It's like big tobacco 2.0. So they get really indignant about that when you show them advertisements and social media and how they're victims of the same approach, of the same few rich white men at the top who don't use the stuff themselves, right? But they want them to use it because that 18 to 24-year-old group is their biggest consumer.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I like that you think about the vaping and the fruit flavors and grape and bubblegum and mint and, it's fun and da-da-da. And I'm like, come on, let's.
Well, and that's just nicotine. I mean, when you get into the marijuana, the choices are outrageous. Scooby-Doo and Girl Scout cookie, and because there's no regulation at all on anything that they call it and what it tastes like.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So Laura, do you have a story, anything you want to just tell us? If you could just wrap this into a story or something about your own family, your own life, about Jonny.
The only thing I can think of is, before Jonny died, 3 days before he died. And of course, he did not tell us that he was suicidal. We didn't even know. We were very unaware at the time that he was having these psychotic thoughts that the mob was after him and all of this. And he came over to our house for dinner. And he said, Mom, I just want you to know you were right. And I said, about what? I didn't even know what we were talking about. And he said, about the marijuana. He just brought it up out of the blue. He said, you told me that marijuana would hurt my brain and it has ruined my mind and my life. And I'm sorry. And I love you. And I kind of saw it as, that he was reconciling because our relationship had really been strained over those 5 years. But that was kind of one of his ways of saying goodbye. And 3 days later, he was gone. And so we use his warning now to tell other teens what he said, that he said marijuana ruined his mind and his life. And I will miss him for the rest of mine, but I will spend every day of my life talking about what he said and making sure that other people don't follow his path. And by creating a nonprofit in his name, it helps me keep his spirit alive. And I just really hope to honor him every day in everything I do. And I think he's probably pretty proud of me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Of course. And you're going to keep some other kids alive not only will you make your son proud and have you, but you're helping families and you're keeping
Yeah.
people alive. And we have to be honest about our brains and about our development and about how drugs impact them. And if we're not, we're going to lose too many people that don't need to be lost. So Laura, I know people are going to love you. I know they're going to want to send you love notes and encouragement, connect with you and bring you or part of your team out to speak to the people they love, to the people they're connected with. So how can they get a hold of you? So
Just,
that
yeah.
Jonny's message to their.
Please just go to our website, johnnysambassadors.org. So no apostrophe, Jonny's Ambassadors, 2 S's. .org. My email is on there. They can reach out to me directly, and depending on where they live, I can get them connected with one of our trainers if they want to bring someone into their organization to talk about it. We'd be happy to help get them someone to come in and give a talk.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for being with me, Laura. Again,
Thank
so sorry about Jonny's loss. And I know so many are grieving out there right now of the people they loved and have buried too soon and too young. And so I just thank you for being with us. And I thank you, listeners, for leaning in and opening your mind to understand really what marijuana is and what is happening to people that we love of all ages, but in particular, our young people. So thanks so much. And we'll see you next week on H3 TV.
Thanks, Annie.